Welcome back. So today I'm going to be showing you guys how to make eclairs. And this one is my husband's request because he has been watching TikTok and YouTube and he came across a couple eclair videos and now he has a craving for them and he decided that I should make this video. So I am making eclairs today and I'm going to show you guys how to do that. So let's get to it. And of course, so you don't forget, remember to hit the like, subscribe, and the notification bell. Let's get to it. Let's make some eclairs. All right, so I'm going to start by making my pastry cream. And I'm going to make this ahead of time. Well, you can make it ahead of time, as in like the day before you actually make your eclairs. But at the minimum, it needs a good 4 hours in the fridge to set. So make this first before you do your choux pastry and the rest of the eclairs. All right, I have 2 bowls and I'm going to separate my eggs. Egg yolks in one bowl, whites in the other. I only need the 4 large egg yolks. The whites, I will just set it aside and make something else with them later. Next, I'm going to add just a pinch of salt and I'm going to turn on my hand mixer to mix the eggs. While it's mixing, I'm going to add a 1/2 cup of sugar. And I'm also going to add 3 tablespoons of cornstarch. And I'm going to mix this until it is very well combined and it'll turn a very, very pale yellow. Make sure you mix them really well. It'll look fairly smooth. It'll still have some grittiness if you were to touch it because the sugar doesn't completely dissolve. But make sure you mix it all together. Scrape down the sides of your bowl at least once or twice. Give it another mix. And once it looks all pale and very light yellow, just set this aside for a few minutes. In a medium-sized pot, you're going to add 2 cups of whole milk and a splash of vanilla. I am adding about a teaspoon of vanilla bean paste. If you don't have the vanilla bean paste, of course, you can just use regular vanilla. Mix it all together, and you're going to bring this to a simmer. Probably just a good simmer. You don't want it to boil, just simmering. Once it has reached that stage, you're going to turn off your stove and you're going to pour this into a glass measuring cup, or at least a measuring cup that is heat proof. It'll make it easier to use. And by easier to use, I mean it'll be easier to pour the hot milk into your eggs so that you can temper them. So what you're doing is you're very, very slowly going to pour that hot milk into your eggs while whisking the whole time. And you're going to do this really slowly because you're going to temper the eggs, which means you're going to slowly warm up the eggs without cooking them so that they don't curdle on you and turn into scrambled eggs. I have done that. It is not fun and it's terrible when you have to restart all this. So do it really slowly. Most recipes will say like only add 1/2 of the milk or 1/2 cup or 1 cup. I just slowly add all of it and continue whisking until it's all been added. Once you have the milk all added, then you're going to pour this all back into that medium-sized pot and you're going to put it back on the stove. And you're only going to put it on like a very low, medium-ish heat. You want it just high enough to warm up your pastry filling, but you don't want it on like a boil. Like you don't want it on high heat so that it boils and then burns and curdles the eggs. You want the heat to gently warm it all up so that as it warms, then it'll start to thicken. The whole point of this is to make it thicken. So just keep stirring it over that low to medium heat. Keep whisking it, stirring it. Eventually, I switched to a spatula to mix it so that I could scrape the bottoms of the bowl or bottom of the pot. And then you take a spoon and you check it to see how thick it is becoming and taste it. Make sure it tastes the way you want it to taste in case you need to add a little extra vanilla to it. Once it has reached that thickness, you need to remove it from the stove right away because you don't want your eggs to turn into scrambled eggs. All right, so I've removed it from the heat. After tasting it, I felt like it needed a little bit more vanilla, so I've added some more vanilla. I've also added 1 tablespoon of unsalted butter to my pastry cream, and I'm going to mix it until the butter has completely melted into it. Once the butter is all melted, I'm going to grab a heat-proof bowl, and I'm going to pour my pastry cream into that bowl or container, whichever you're using. Once I've put it in my bowl, I'm going to I'm going to go and get a piece of plastic wrap, and I'm going to put plastic wrap over the top of the pastry cream, making sure that it is touching the surface of the pastry cream. And you want to do that because it's going to help prevent a skin from forming as this cools. So place your plastic wrap right on top of the surface of your pastry cream. Then you're going to put this in the fridge for a minimum of 4 hours or overnight if you're doing this the day before. All right, I'm going to make the choux pastry now. So in a medium-sized pot over medium heat, I'm adding 1 cup of water and a half a cup of salted butter, and I'm going to bring that to a boil. Once it's boiling, I'm adding a teaspoon of vanilla bean paste. If you don't have vanilla bean paste, that's fine. You can add a teaspoon of vanilla. All right, so once you've added that, you're going to add 1 cup of flour, and I'm going to start by whisking my flour in. I've also turned down the heat to low. Once it gets too thick to whisk, then I am going to switch to a wooden spoon and keep mixing. Once all my flour is in my pot, I'm going to remove this from the stove, and I'm going to keep mixing it with my wooden spoon until it cools down a little bit. You do not want this ball of dough to be too hot when you go to add the eggs, because then the eggs are going to curdle and turn to scrambled eggs, and then it's ruined and you have to start over. So keep mixing it for a little bit until it cools down. Now that it has cooled down a bit, I'm going to add 4 large eggs, and I'm adding 1 at a time. And I'm going to make sure each one is mixed in really well and it's well combined. You could do this in your mixer if you wanted to. I've never done it in the mixer, but if you do, you could probably add all 4 eggs at the same time and let it mix until it becomes soft and pipeable. I prefer doing this by hand because I feel like I have more control over it and I can see and tell when it's ready. Of course, it does take more arm power to do it by hand, and my arm does get really tired from mixing, but I feel like it's absolutely worth it. So mix in your 4 eggs until your choux pastry becomes very velvety, smooth. It'll be kind of like a creamy texture, and it'll be pipeable. It will no longer be a ball of dough. Now I'm going to take a large piping bag with a round tip on it, with a large round tip, and I'm going to fill it with my choux pastry. If you don't have a piping bag with a tip, that's totally fine. You could use a little Ziploc baggie, put it in, and then just cut one of the corners into the size hole that you want. All right, so I have my oven preheating to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. While it's preheating, I have a large baking sheet lined with some parchment paper, and I'm going to take my choux pastry and pipe it into about 4 or 5 inch long logs. You could do whatever shape you want, but I'm making eclairs today, so they have to be sort of that long log shape. Boy, that sounds really weird. Anyway, make them into whatever shape you would like. If you're doing cream puffs, then make them into little round cream puff shapes. Make them as big or as little as you want. Mine are just going to be little mini ones. So I also have a little bowl of water sitting next to my baking sheet, and that's because every time I pipe one of these, it leaves a little bit of a peak on it, and it's the way I'm piping it, I know, and it is what it is. It's been a while since I've done any piping work, so I need some little practice. Okay, so you use the water and you just lightly tap down any of the peaks and reshape them. If you don't put water on your fingers before doing that, the dough is going to stick to your hands and just make a mess. So use a little water to do this. Once your sheet is full and your oven is ready, you're going to pop them into the oven. They're going to bake for about 30 to 35 minutes until they're lightly golden in color. At that point, you can take them out, and using like a chopstick or a straw or something, you're going to poke a hole into each one, and that's so that you can fill them later. If you forget, it's not a big deal. which I did forget. So anyway, after that 35 minutes, then you're going to turn your oven off. You're going to open the oven door and you're going to leave them in there for about another 10 minutes with the oven door open. As mine are cooling down, I realize my piping skills need a lot of practice because these all look a little funky and misshapen, but it doesn't matter because they're still going to taste amazing. So now these just need to completely cool before I add any of the filling. I'm ready to fill them. So my pastry cream, I'm just going to give it a mix so that it's smooth again. It just turns kind of not hard, but like it sets really nicely and you just want to break it all up. So give it a mix, put it in a piping bag with a fairly small round tip, and then you're just going to fill each of your eclairs. Now, some of mine did bust out the sides or come out the other end. They are not perfect by any means, but I'm going to make them look as perfect as I can. That's the point. Make them look nice as long as they taste amazing. Who cares what they look like in the end? All right, so fill all of your eclairs, and then we will move on to finishing these. I am now ready to finish these off. So in a very small little saucepan, I'm adding a half a cup of heavy cream, and I'm going to put that on my stove and bring it to a very light simmer. While I'm waiting for that to simmer, I am going to use some of the baker's chocolate, and it's semi-sweet, 4 ounces of it, and I'm going to chop that all up. If you don't have baker's chocolate, but you have semi-sweet chocolate chips, that's totally fine as well. You can use them. You need 4 ounces. All right, put it all into a heat-safe bowl, heat-proof bowl. And then once your milk is simmering, you're going to pour that on top of your chocolate and you're just going to give it a little stir and you're going to let it sit for just a couple minutes so the milk can very gently melt your chocolate. All right, after leaving it for a couple minutes, then you're just going to mix it. Stir it all up. The chocolate should be melted. Mix all that cream into it, and you should get this beautiful, glossy, super inviting, yummy chocolate ganache. All right, now you're not letting this sit. You need it sort of warm and, well, not set. You're going to take each of your eclairs, and you're just going to dip the tops into the chocolate. That's it. Just dip them in. If you want to dunk the whole thing in, by all means, do that too. Whatever you would like, however you want to decorate them, this is the fun part. Go ahead and decorate them. I'm going to dip each one into some chocolate. Then I'm going to just let these sit here until the chocolate hardens. I'm probably just going to pop them into the fridge for a few minutes. After letting the chocolate set, I'm going to cut one open and see how they look. So I cut it open and look at all that pastry filling inside. It looks so beautiful. All that pastry cream. These are going to be so delicious. And yes, I've already eaten a couple of them while I was waiting. All right, so now I'm just going to put them on a plate, make them look all super pretty, take a whole bunch of pictures. That's it. That was the whole recipe. So thank you guys so much for joining me today. Please remember to hit the like, subscribe, and the notification bell. And I will see you guys all next week.